Lundun from the Secret Wine Society joining us, by the way. We will be there next week. Going to be out there broadcasting live, as the saying goes, from the Secret Wine Society. We'll have some details on that coming up, but looking forward to that. And they're going to have kind of a party there. You got a chef that you're bringing in, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and invite you to come on up. So, Robert, Don, hi, welcome back.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. We're talking mold, and
Yeah,
thankfully Melissa from RNDC showed up because she had the sake.
Oh, well, good. Thanks for bringing the sake.
If she couldn't find us, we wouldn't be drinking right now, so I'm very grateful.
Oh, well, good. Yeah, me too. What is your particular group? What do they do?
So, Melissa Gray, I work with RNDC. We're a distributing company. We're a national distributor, but our headquarters are located in Portland. So we distribute wine and sake throughout the state of Oregon out of our Portland warehouse. And I am Robert's key account manager, and he purchases a lot of sake from us.
And she's
Really?
my personal wake-up call.
Okay. She calls you like early in the morning to...
Yeah, she'll say, well, you know, the truck's going to be there in 15 minutes to deliver your stuff. And I live 15 minutes away.
No.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I don't wake up easy. Cause
So do you show up in your underwear and there they are? I mean, is that
she's the reason I'm wearing this hat. And
Okay.
like I said, okay, I'll give you an example. So I had this really weird plastic, almost like clown-looking Ronald McDonald alarm clock in my kitchen, right? So I'm making my espresso, this thing starts beeping. So I hit the button to turn it off and it keeps beeping. So I'm like hitting the button over and over again, it keeps beeping. Finally I turn it over, I pull the batteries out, it keeps beeping. So now it's starting to freak me out, right? So I literally pull the thing apart, yank out all the wires, and it keeps beeping. And finally, I just get super frustrated, tear the whole thing apart, take it outside, and chuck it down the hill. And I suddenly wake up, realize I'm dreaming. It was my phone trying to wake me up.
Okay.
It was literally, I don't know, my body doesn't want to get up in the morning, but
Got it.
that's for the beeping on the phone. But if I get a call, I tend to wake up. So she's done that many times.
How long have you been doing this, Melissa?
I've been in the business about 10 years, but
Cool.
with the current company, about 4.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of it?
Meeting wonderful people like Robert,
Yeah.
visiting accounts. I
Way
travel.
to suck up.
I paid her to say that.
Yeah. Way to suck up.
No, you develop a lot of great relationships with your accounts, and I travel a lot too. So I definitely have my favorite people.
All right. Anyway, well, you bring sake. So where do you want to start?
Let's talk about Koji. So,
Okay.
Basically, what's the purpose of this Koji and what is it? So, Koji Keen is a mold. It's a whole class of molds. They're called
Aspergillus.
Aspergillus, correct. And they were first described in 1726 by this Italian. I have his name here. I'll give him a shout out.
Oh, good, because he could be listening.
Pier Antonio Micheli. And this guy, he described like 1,400 plants that no one had ever described before. You didn't really discover them. People, they're out there, but you have to describe it. So he was a botanist, and he's got a statue in the most famous art gallery in Italy. So he was a very important person, and surprisingly, I found out in this research that he also described botrytis, which is what they use to make dessert wines. It's another type of mold.
Hmm.
So this mold has been domesticated. So it came from Aspergillus or Aspergillus flavus, which produces toxins. And the mold that they're using here, this is specific to rice, so Aspergillus oryzae. It does not produce toxins.
Well, that's good. That's a positive.
Yeah, so they found a pottery jar in China, and it had an alcoholic beverage in it, or remains thereof. And it had rice, and so the only way that it could have turned into alcohol is if they had the mold already. So it's been around a very, very, very long time.
Well, it's kind of important to mention the importance of the Koji Keen, because without that, it's not, or the yeast isn't going to have anything to feed on.
Correct. So, you know, they mill the outside of the rice off, like we said.
Right. They steam it.
They wash it, then they steam it to get a certain content, but you still just have starch. So they'll take it up to the Koji Mudo. Mudo's just like their room. It's got to be kind of still. You don't want a lot of other, bacteria, fungus around or whatever. And they'll sprinkle the tane means spore. So tane koji, they'll sprinkle these spores onto the rice, and it'll slowly start to eat into the rice. Now that's one reason they steam it and wash it, and that's got to be precise because they want the outside, they call it gaeko nainan. That means the outside of the kernel is slightly harder than the inside, which is also what they want out of a good katana sword. You want hard but not break.
Yeah.
But what happens is when you sprinkle the mold, it starts searching for moisture. Now, if that moisture is in the inside of the kernel, it starts to burrow in. So that's how it starts breaking it down. There's a couple ways they can do that. They can do it a very large batch. They call that toko. And so they spread all the rice out, the whole 20% on one big table. And people can get to it very easy because you've got to keep the temperature. They're regulating it. You can't be too hot.
Can't be too cold.
Can't
It has
be
to
too
be
cold.
the Cinderella temp.
Correct. And they're trying to get this stuff to grow evenly across. Can't be, one end of the table might be a little colder, so they're moving the stuff around. And then they've got another method called hako koji. Hako means box in Japanese. So that's a smaller amount, maybe 15 kilograms. If it's a table, you might have 110. So you've got an easier way for the temperature control because you've got a smaller box to work
Yeah.
with.
And that's all complicated too, because as this stuff is working, it's generating its own heat. So you have to
Correct.
continue
That's why you have to be all over it, and people have to be very good. Now the ultimate method is called futa koji. That's where they're taking small, about 3 kilograms on this. It's like a little drawer, and you've got our little shelf or like a little square box. 3 kilograms of rice spread out, and you've got all these trays. And what'll happen is you can get in and see exactly what's happening very closely, and to control the temperature, they will move these trays around.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's incredibly labor intensive. In fact, sometimes the workers will sleep in that room because you're getting up every hour or 2 hours. So you don't have a chance to even leave. That's the hardest way to make it. It's only used for the very, very best stuff. Because you can imagine it takes a lot of time. But they get very precise temperature control, and they can shuffle these boxes around to different places in the Koji Mudo room. Now, the first one we're drinking here is called YUKI no BOSHA.
Before we go any further, I just want to mention that the reason that they apply the mold to it is because rice is starchy, and the yeast can't eat or process the starch. It has to be broken down into sugar because that's what yeast love to eat. And what the mold does, it literally breaks down the starch molecules. What do they call it?
Saccharification.
Saccharification, where it breaks those molecules down, and so it's got all the sugar now, breaks it down, and the yeast can go, yay, it's a buffet. And they go in and chow down on the sugars.
Yes, this aspergillus, the name comes from an aspergillum, which was this object that a priest would use, because if you look at it under a microscope, it's got this bulbous end, looks like a handle, and they would sprinkle holy water with it. So that's where the name of that genus came from.
Okay.
So it is important. It does create a myriad of different enzymes, and controlling the amount of each enzyme is what really earns these guys their dollars. That's where you can put your signature on the sake by precisely getting the temperature to get the ratio of enzymes that you want, because you've got several different types of, there's glucoamylase, alpha amylase, and then you also have proteases. So now with the sake you're drinking, this is called YUKI no BOSHA.
Which is tasty.
Now this is a YAMAHAI, so we're going to talk about that. That's a style of making the yeast starter, which is why it's like got this fullness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I make sure everyone's got another drink. I'm still thirsty.
I did, yeah.
But so this guy that makes this, so this is up in Akita, which is northern Japan. And the Toji's name, we'll give it to you here, is Takahashi Toichi-san. And this guy apparently has won 20 gold medals and 7 silver medals. And the emperor also has listed him as like a living artisan of highest quality. So I think he knows what he's doing. But the point of this is this. So we mentioned like there's a couple colors or types that we have. Yellow Koji is what is being used for this. The white Koji would normally be used for shochu, and then the black Koji we say is used for the drink on Okinawa called awamori. So there's another one that they use for soy sauce, but that's Aspergillus soja. So this one is using the traditional yellow, which is what you're mostly going to see. Now there is a trend to move into using the different colors of Koji to mix it up a little bit. So the second bottle, which we're going to put into a wine glass here in a second, is actually a champagne.
It's a sake champagne.
Correct. Now more about...
So this stuff though, I mean this is solid. What do you think, Rob?
The first stuff,
Yeah.
really good.
So have you already tried the second?
No.
Anthony? Oh, okay.
No.
No, so this is a YAMAHAI. We're going to get to that in a future show. That's a way of making the yeast starter. And it's a JUNMAI, which as you remember is like the beer purity law. So they didn't add anything except for the Koji, water, and rice. The Seimai Bowai, or the polishing ratio is 65. They're using 2 types of rice, Yamada Nishiki and one called Akita Komachi. And they call that an ippanmai, that's actually a table rice, but they're using it for part of it to impart flavor. Like this one doesn't have to, it's supposed to be savory. So you don't need some super expensive, highly polished rice for the entire thing. And they're probably, I couldn't find it, but they're probably just using the Yamada Nishiki, using one or the other to make the Koji. Sometimes when you make the Koji in the room, that rice and the other rice is different. So I'd have to get probably an email then to figure out exactly what they're using for what. But these Yamahais, when you see that, are going to be a richer style. The reason you don't see them is most people go to a Japanese restaurant. This isn't necessarily going to go with sashimi. It's pretty rich, right? But it's not designed for that. So these Yamahais, we're going to return to that later. It's a whole class. It's one of my favorite styles, and I think you see why.
Oh wow.
Now the next one we're going to move on to is, now this is actually truly made like a champagne where there's a double fermentation in the bottle.
By the way, Robert and Don from the Secret Wine Society with their secret guest Melissa. And one of the things, I mean, Robert has one of the best wine libraries in the state, but he also carries sake, which a lot of people don't really get. Before we move on, we need to take a break here, so we're going to do that, and then we're going to come back with this second one that sounds really interesting. It is the Wake Up Call. Good morning.